Katrina Huevel, a journalist from The Nation, recently scolded a CNN host on Bernie Sanders and also critiqued the mainstream media. Take a look.
If Donald Trump is the Republican story of the summer, then the Democratic story is probably Bernie Sanders. He's gone from, in some ways, a marginal candidate to serious contender in record time, doing better in polls and fundraising than most talking heads ever imagined he would. But has his insurgent campaign dodged the kind of scrutiny that candidates typically get? Does he have a media cheerleading section? Let me show you an example. Sanders is on the cover of the latest issue of the liberal magazine The Nation, interviewed by its Washington correspondent John Nichols, the very same John Nichols who rousingly introduced Sanders at a rally earlier this month.
Wisconsin progressives, you demanded a candidate who spoke your language. And ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, please welcome Senator Bernie Sanders.
Now, when I saw this, I couldn't help but think about Fox's Sean Hannity, who was barred from speaking at a Tea Party rally a few years ago. Fox did not want him doing that. To talk about that and Bernie Sanders more broadly, the editor and publisher of The Nation, Katrina Huevel, joins me now here on the set. And Katrina, I don't want to perpetuate a false narrative. Sean Hannity and John Nichols are very different people. John is foremost a writer. Sean Hannity is foremost a television host. But what's your reaction to the idea that someone who's interviewing Bernie Sanders should not be up on stage introducing Bernie Sanders?
So first of all, The Nation has been upfront since we were founded 150 years ago, upfront about our values, our principles. We are independent. We have called it like it is. We have criticized Democratic candidates, presidents. And John Nichols has introduced Bernie Sanders for over 25 years. I mean, Bernie Sanders...
But does that make it right?
But let me just say, John Nichols was talking in that context about Wisconsin's tradition of progressivism, La Follette and others. He wasn't telling people how to think. He wasn't telling them how to vote. And in the cover story, the interview in The Nation, John Nichols pushes Bernie Sanders on issues of policing, on immigration, on issues he's not leading with, because he's talking primarily about economic inequality in this country, how billionaires are controlling our politics. One thing I would say, Brian, is when you talk about going soft, I think it's important to look at the corporate media and how it has gone soft on what matters to millions of Americans. I like to say that too often the mainstream corporate media gives us a downsized politics of excluded alternatives. What do I mean?
Downsized? What do you mean?
Downsized. Bernie Sanders speaks for millions of Americans in this country. The issues he speaks to are tapping into anxieties, passions about where this country is heading, issues that are in essence mainstream, but for too long the corporate media has written them off as marginal. Bernie Sanders has been in Congress since 1990. He was on Meet the Press for the first time last year.
Let's think about that.
John McCain
last year
sleeps at Meet the Press. but also...
But why do you think that is? Why is it that Sanders wasn't on Meet the Press, for example?
Because there is a policing of the parameters of what is considered acceptable politics in this country. The gatekeepers too often will say, well, debt-free higher education, defense cuts to the defense budget, tax hikes for the very wealthy. Even the New York Times last month had a story about how those issues might make Bernie Sanders unelectable. Why? Majorities of Americans are in sync with him on this issue. So I think, listen, we need strong coverage. On Monday, The Nation has a piece about Bernie Sanders' stance on gun control. Hillary Clinton is teeing that up as an issue in this election. There are tough questions, and I don't think fairness means being uncritical, but I would submit that the corporate media has been unfair to the people of this country for too long by not giving them the full range of views that this country deserves to hear. And that's what I mean by a downsized politics of excluded alternatives. So he's an insurgent candidate, but he is speaking about solutions. He's speaking about ideas that this country's hungry for. And the gatekeepers, Brian, I have to say, you know, the idea that it's only 2 months out, right? So his name recognition, the media will play a big role. Will they give him the space, and not just as a foil to Hillary Clinton? Will they keep saying he's unelectable? Or will they give him and his issues the space? Because too often, as you well know, campaigns in this country are covered as a horse race. And the issues which Bernie Sanders wants to talk about desperately, running a serious campaign, talking about serious solutions, can that be heard in our system? Because to me, the measure of democracy is whether our elections become debates, vibrant debates, and whether campaigns lift up new ideas that people want to hear.
So now, before I discuss this video, I really wanted to clarify her statement. She constantly referred to the gatekeepers. Now, really what she's talking about is the mainstream media, because they actually control information. If they don't want something getting out to the American people, they can kill it by just not discussing it. Now, the media is very powerful. I mean, they can prime individuals and they can administer salience cues to actually influence what we think is more important and what's not important, such as Benghazi with Fox News, for example. Now, they are, in effect, in control of political dialogue in the US. With all the momentum that Bernie Sanders is gaining, well, they're realizing that they're slowly but surely losing control. So this is something that absolutely terrifies them, and I absolutely love watching this. It's great. Now, what I thought was really great about this interview is that Katrina, she issued so many implicit put-downs. I mean, she basically called the host and his network inept, saying that they're not doing their jobs, which is 100% true. And I think that's really great because the media, they don't realize, or maybe they do realize and they're just not being open about it, but they don't realize that they're not doing their job. I mean, if you really want to do your job and you want to be objective and you want the stone cold facts, well then, instead of critiquing Bernie Sanders and saying, look, he's just an extremist, you take each of his views one by one and you would disaggregate them, you'd break them apart, you'd see, well look, what would the effect be? What do the studies say if we actually adopt universal health care, or otherwise known as a single-payer system, or Medicaid for all? Or Medicare for all, more specifically. So they, one, need to examine that from a political science perspective, and two, what they need to do is they need to look at public opinion polls. Believe it or not, we actually live in a democracy. I know it's really diminished, and that our democracy is not as good as it used to be, but the fact of the matter is that we are a democracy. So what matters when you talk about policies is what the American people thinks. Now look, I just did a video a couple weeks back where I looked at 10 of Bernie Sanders' positions, and I also looked at the American people's positions, and on every single one of them, he had support from the American people. So it is the case that the media isn't doing their job in trying to discredit Bernie Sanders and trying to make it appear as though the nation is not objective when they're actually doing their job because they're being objectives. They're just saying that the facts line up with what Bernie Sanders is saying. You can do that and not be biased. I mean, you don't have to pretend to be neutral and say, look, we're directly in the middle, okay? We think that there are two equal sides when it comes to climate change, even though 97% of scientists, actually 97 to 98%, they're all in agreement that anthropogenic climate change is a reality. So you can't frame this debate to appear neutral in order to be perfectly even-handed to both sides. There's not two equal sides on a lot of issues, and that's what they don't realize. So the fact that this journalist went on there and just schooled this host on Bernie Sanders and how the mainstream media isn't doing their jobs, man, it was awesome to watch. And I really I want to applaud Katrina for doing this because that was awesome. That was boss.